Donald Trump's world is closing in on him. The Epstein files are back in the spotlight, and he's forced to backtrack on ICE deployments while the Republicans are getting ready to get shellacked in the midterm elections. Well, today's guest, Rick Wilson, he's one of Donald Trump's biggest critics, and we have a lot to talk about. He's the co founder of the Lincoln Project, a veteran political strategist, and an expert on everything about Donald Trump and his weak spots. He joins me to break down why MAGA voters twist themselves in knots trying to excuse Trump's erratic behavior, why Republican politicians should be concerned for the 2026 midterm elections, and what Trump plans to do going forward from here. But first, subscribe to this channel to stay informed about how you can defend democracy. Rick Wilson, welcome back to Defending Democracy.
Hello, my friend. How are you, Mark?
Well, I've been better. Let's see. We've got paramilitary on the streets of our cities, which
We
actually,
do.
if you had asked me a year ago, would I rather have the military or the paramilitary on the streets of the cities? I'm not sure which way it would have gone. I'm kind of longing now
Right?
for the days of the military of the National Guard. What do you make
I'd
of it?
take the actual National Guard now in lieu of the what I call camo Bull Connor and these guys.
Do you have a take for kind of what the Trump plan is from here, right? Like obviously they did a series of terrible things in Minneapolis and elsewhere. They got over their skis because the one thing Donald Trump doesn't tolerate is bad press. And for a second it looked like he backed away, but now maybe he's not backing away. Like what is your where do you think this goes?
I think he was trying to show the Democrats in the Senate, like for 1 or 2 days, I'm going to back down. I'm going to be reasonable. I'm going to negotiate on this so that they would pass the DHS bill. They have now split the DHS bill out, and now we're going to end up debating just the DHS bill on its own merits, which is not great for Trump. So I think he's going to go as heavy into the distractions and the craziness in the next 2 weeks or so as they can. But I will say I think that he doesn't really have a plan per se himself. His people have a plan. I think that is leaning towards disrupting the 2026 election. And my theory of the case on this whole Georgia shenanigan this week is that he's looking for not for an excuse to just please the MAGA base, but as a wrong but Trumpian predicate to say, "Oh, I was cheated out of my election in 2020. I deserve a third term."
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, he has said that. The question is, will he act on it? And so I will tell you, my immediate reaction to the search warrant and the other activities in Georgia is obviously it's terrible that they are executing a search warrant against Fulton County. It is relitigating the big lie, but honestly, Joe Biden served his 4-year term. They're not going to find anything, and this is all that. So what this is really about, and this goes to your point, what this is really about is not the like Fulton County per se, but I think he is trying to figure out how to crack the lock of being able to seize ballot boxes in the future.
I agree
And
with that
and
completely.
you know what I mean? And like this was a proof of concept. Like if we can seize old ballots, then that tells us something about what has to do, to execute this. And I wonder if you think that's even too conspiratorial or out there.
No, I think we should be very careful right now not to not to be I don't think we're conspiratorial enough at the moment in a weird way. I think that these people have an agenda. And again, it's not Trump himself because Donald Trump is mentally disorganized. He is not strategic as a thinker. He's got a lot of cunning. He's feral. He's sort of a schemer. But there are a lot of people around here from the Heritage Foundation guys on down who look at this as a very interesting, I think you're right, sort of an operational planning matrix or format for how do you seize ballot boxes in the future? What do you do if you believe that you can intervene in state election work at a level that would get you, say, to preserve the majority in the House? And I think we should not underestimate their willingness and ability to try that sort of thing. I really strongly believe that that underestimating their political and malice right now is a mistake.
Why do you think that right now, if you were to ask yourself, who are the commentators who are speaking most clearly and like with direct non-hedging language about the threat to Donald Trump, you have almost all former Republicans. You have Bill Kristol, you have the folks at the Bulwark. It's really noticeable the language that I hear from my friends and colleagues on the left and the Democratic Party, and the folks that who were former Republicans, who just seem to have a much more direct language that they use around this. Maybe you'll say that this is why you guys are always better at communications, but is there something more than that?
Being able to articulate a threat like Trump is not about party. I don't, in my opinion, it's about being willing to say, I'm going to put aside my policy preferences. I'm going to put aside my biases, my desires to do things a certain way, and I'm going to get to the X. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to figure out what I have to do to win. And when in the Republican Party, you grow up with this. When you're a consultant, as I was for 30 years, you grow up with this sort of catchphrase: "Just win, baby." And the corollary to "just win, baby" is stay on message. And the old joke used to be, if you have trouble understanding point one, refer to point two. If you have trouble understanding point two, refer back to point one. I've been opposed to Trump since 2015, publicly, loudly, sometimes probably too loudly, much to the detriment of my old career, my friendships, my relationships, across the board. But I also came out of that culture that created the creature that became Donald Trump. Trump is different from every other Republican who's ever existed, but he was an inevitability given what we did for a long time, which I've sort of tried to do penance for a decade now. But we activated the low propensity, low income, low intellectual, or low educational achievement voter. We activated them with fear. We poked their amygdala over and over and over and over again. And so I know the creature that emerged from that laboratory, and he is that creature. And I'm I have a big belief that you shouldn't try to go from A to Z in politics. You go from A to B, and then from
Yeah.
C to D, because the bank shotting it doesn't work. I remember, Mark, I was on a conversation back a few days after January 6th with a bunch of Democratic donors and consultants and elected officials. Like, what should we do now? And a very serious person who I respect said, "Well, we've got to get back on our prescription drug coverage message." I did a Rick Wilson. I was like, "The fuck are you talking about? The Capitol is on fire still. There's still broken glass on the ground. This is you're going to talk about prescription drugs when the Constitution was on a razor's edge from being shredded by these guys? Are you kidding me?" So, I mean, I guess it's because I know the fear I know the nature of the monster, and I know that if people don't fear it appropriately, it will win.
We're going to come back to elections in a moment, but along those lines, I've got a question that I need to ask you about Minnesota and really the aftermath of the shootings, which is, in the early 2000s during the Tea Party movement, you had a lot of rhetoric coming out of the right about, you know, individual liberties and not having government overreach. Obviously, the Republican Party has been the champion of the Second Amendment and that whole movement, and yet it seemed like almost instantaneously Donald Trump and his administration collapsed all that. Is there genuine baggage or harm that he has done to his coalition in doing that? In other words, do the rank and file voters really say, you know what, like, love Donald Trump, but the Second Amendment and my individual liberty is more important? Or is all of that negotiable in the back and forth?
I will say that among the most shocking breaches among Trump's base that I've observed in the last decade, it has taken an awful lot to separate them out from Trump. But two things have done that I've observed fairly effectively. One is the cover up of the Epstein files,
Yeah.
which is unfurling again as you and I are talking right now.
And we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And the other part of it has been this thing on guns. There was always a skepticism about Pam Bondi because she
Hmm.
was never
Really?
one of their Second Amendment people in Florida, and I knew her when she was AG, and it took Rick Scott and Jeb Bush were very much had to sort of like ride herd on her on Second Amendment matters because Florida has as folks probably know, the gunshine state, a very insane, over the top degree of Second Amendment. Uh, I don't know, love, whatever the word you want to use is, but there is nothing here that is surprising. A lot of these guys, they were always skeptical that Trump would sell them out on Second Amendment, and he has. And that's the truth of it. He actually has sold them out on the thing that they really care about.
And so you mentioned Epstein, and I would argue that during Donald Trump's entire career, like his entire political career since 2015, the issue that has harmed him the most has been the Epstein files. Like because it has been seen as a betrayal of something that his base really cares about, and they don't give him a free pass on. And as you point out, as we're recording this, another big dump of Epstein files have come out. There's already been some interesting documents, and then those documents were removed from the
Were then
public record. So
removed by the DOJ.
by the Department of Justice, already seeing that. But before we get to the new documents, like, do you agree that the Epstein files have been that one thing, and why? I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Rick Wilson in a moment. But Donald Trump and his administration are involved in a cover up that is deeper than we ever could have imagined. But Democracy Docket is working hard to bring you the latest democracy news and analysis every single day. Its free newsletters are the best way to stay informed on everything from the midterm elections to what the legacy media isn't covering, and much, much more. Subscribe for free by clicking on the link in the description below.
One of the things about the Epstein files is explained by the origin story of Trump in 2016. A right wing conspiracy theory was made up out of whole cloth, completely out of whole cloth, that Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, George Soros, a whole variety of Democratic elected officials, consultants, leaders, donors were involved in a DC based but global child trafficking, cannibal, pedophile sex ring. And as absurd as that sounds, it was promoted very heavily by um, by Russian disinformation, by American conspiracy theorists like Jack Posobiec, um, Alex Jones, Mike Cernovich, all these folks that were on the fringes of reason as a rule, and they promoted this because it had massive interest by the base. Something about it clicked with that Republican base. And even though it didn't disappear after 2016, and she was never, quote, brought to justice. There was never mass arrests of these secret pedophiles that QAnon kept promising them.
Right, which, by the way, was supposed to be going on in the basement of a pizza place in Washington, D.C.
Correct, which does not
That
have a
actually
basement.
led to a deranged
Yeah,
man going to the pizza place and firing
yeah.
gunshots.
But Mark, they did this in a way that wired itself into the brain of the MAGA base, and it gave them permission to hate Democrats because they're like, oh, they're all pedophiles, they're all sex traffickers, they're all child molesters, and it was beaten over and over and over and over again on all these social media channels, all these alternative spaces that the right wing media and right wing political activists exist. But it turns out it was projection. It turns out that the guy really involved with a guy who ran a global pedophile sex ring was Donald Trump being involved with Jeffrey Epstein. They were friends for decades. They were running buddies in the social scene in both New York and Palm Beach. And as much as they have said, "Oh, Democrats are all pedophiles," it turns out that that Donald Trump is a guy who has now put Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the facilitator of this ring, into a cushy club fed, and that Donald Trump has for months or years now, you can make the argument, covered up the vast tranches of documents that it took a congressional um, discharge petition to pass a law to excise from their hands. And even now, even now, they're trying to pull back information on Epstein right this minute. that was released today. Still now they're trying to pull it back again. None of this works with his Republican base. They are psychologically broken about it. They are angry. They feel betrayed. And I think one of the things, Mark, that they also feel is the ring of truth.
Hmm.
They knew Donald Trump was a degenerate. They knew Donald Trump was a bad guy and a liar and an adulterer and a con man. And they thought, well, he hates the people I hate, so it's okay. So I have found this to be an absolutely fascinating issue to watch him squirm on it and watch his base. And they've kind of given up contorting themselves on it because it's unspinnable. There's not enough mayonnaise in the world to turn it into chicken salad. So
Yeah. Well, mark
it's
my
a
words, and maybe I'll be proved wrong because like you said, as we're recording this, these files are just being released right now. I don't believe that we have seen the last of the all of the Epstein
oh
files.
no, I think you're
I want
completely
to I want to
correct.
I want to point you to something that Todd Blanche said today. He happened to be giving a press briefing, I guess, at the White House at the same time that these released. He said, quote, "The number of responsive pages is significantly smaller than the total number of pages initially collected. That's what we're releasing, more than 3 million pages today, and not the 6 million pages that we collected." I'm sorry. So someplace between these 6 million pages they
Six
collected and the 3
million
million pages they
pages.
released, that's a big delta there, Rick.
Yeah, and that strikes me as something that when they released that first tranche of documents, and
Yeah,
Pam
that's
Bondi
right.
did the whole, "This is it, it's done,
Yep,
it's over,
yep,
or no more,
yep.
you got what you're getting," and it makes sense now why they had to hire 1,000 people or give overtime to 1,000 FBI agents to look through these documents. It makes sense now why they were so dug in on having these documents redacted and examined. But even then, they didn't do it successfully. I mean, Trump is all over these materials, and it strikes me as interesting that as much as they want to deny that Donald Trump even knew Jeffrey Epstein, that's over now. This is over now. They are stuck with this story forever. This is a guy with whom he had a relationship and a friendship, and with whom he clearly participated in some of these extraordinarily evil and egregious behaviors. And I don't know that that means Donald Trump is an actual pedophile, but he's certainly in a long-running pattern in the rest of his life was clearly willing to be around people who were abusing women.
Let me try to ask a question about the Trump voters. And you know these folks very well, given your work in Republican politics. So, if you are an evangelical Christian who cares about the Second Amendment, what is left of the attraction to Donald Trump? Like, what is I know the answer might
Yeah,
be abortion, but he hasn't even really on
it's not
abortion.
even
Like, is he
abortion.
really?
It's not even abortion, Mark. What the answer is, the attraction that remains is a very narrow slice of the culture war aspects of the GOP. It's the owning the libs guys. The media is evil, and I'm going to help Trump own the libs. I'm going to hurt the people that I think look down on me. And that is a fairly narrow and and sort of small number of folks. But if you're a working class person who thought Trump was going to bring you economic prosperity, you were wrong. If you're an evangelical who thinks he shares your Christian values, you're wrong. So now it's sort of the chaos guys, in my view, who are playing this thing out. And I don't think we're I don't think we're at a point where the base has permanently shattered, but the base has shrunk by about a third. And it used to be about 40% of Americans, and now it's in the low 30s, high 20s, who are like the Trump hotties, I call them. Um, but yeah, he's broken faith with them, as he would inevitably break faith with everybody. He's a guy who has never kept in his life a business deal, a marriage vow, a promise of almost any kind that wasn't about himself. So, you know, I don't have a lot of pity for them. They have made their bed with Trump, and he's as horrible a person as can be imagined, but they have to own it now. This is what they chose. This is the world they elected to live in.
All right, let's talk about the 2026 election, and then this will undoubtedly bleed into your concern and my concern about the 2028 election. So we've got the midterms, a little more than or less than 10 months, around 10 months away, I guess. And the fact is that if you want to know which party is going to win midterm elections, look at the president's popularity. I mean, that's a good baseline level.
It is a famously accurate predictive measure, and and looking at the numbers today, um, if you're a Republican in a R plus 10 or less seat, I would be looking for work.
If you're a consultant, right, you were a consultant to Republican candidates, are you saying to them, look, distance yourself from him and try to
Oh
build
yeah.
space? Or are you saying, look, just grab hold of him and hope that he
Oh,
can energize his base? Like what's the
the
play here in those
yeah,
districts?
the difficulty here, Mark, is that the base only strategy, given where Trump's numbers are with his base, is insufficient in a election year where Trump is not personally on the ballot. When Trump is on the ballot, their voter behavior of those low propensity voters, we score them on a scale of 1 to 5. A 5 voter votes in every single election, including off year elections for dog catcher, county commissioner, all that stuff. A 1 voter never comes out unless it's like a really famous person. Trump drew a lot of 1 and 2 voters out to vote for him in 16, in 20, and in 24. But when he's not on the ballot, as he wasn't on the ballot in 18 and in 22, those people stay home. They do not come out to associatively give their support to Republicans that he endorses. So right now their turnout model is very nervous. They're very much on a cusp of a collapse where the people that do come out and vote, the higher propensity Republicans, are looking at his numbers and they're like, I hate what he's doing. I hate this chaos. I don't want to see ice in our streets. I don't like the tariffs. I don't like the trade war garbage. Everything he's doing right now, I couldn't script it better for him to hurt the Republican Party if you put me in charge of his strategy right now.
So and if you were working now for a Democrat who's running one of those seats, you hear a lot of Democrats to the point you made about after January 6th, that anecdote you told, you hear a lot of Democrats say, got to focus on the economy, got to focus on the economy, got to focus on prices, affordability, and the like. And you hear others saying, but they're killing people in Minneapolis. Like, how would you tell Democrats to run where you have all of these different issues? Do you just stick to the economic message or do you try to broaden it out?
Look, I think you can package this thing up in a way that reaches the heart and the gut. Democrats very frequently try to reach the brain of
Yeah.
voters. They try to say, this is our policy. Read page 74, Appendix 2, and you'll understand why you should vote for me. And whatever's on page 74, Appendix 2, it might make perfect sense. It might be really smart. But the average voter doesn't process information that way. They don't they don't they don't look at it that way. And the heart and the brain are very different, and the gut and the brain are very different. And and I want Democrats to talk to people right now. And the form I'm using is essentially this. This is crazy. He's hurting you. We're going to fix it. And that doesn't mean you have to drill down and do a million different policy papers. It means you have to assure people that you get it. You get that they're hurting. You get that the economy is making their lives miserable. You get that the chaos is weighing on them like crazy and they don't want it anymore. And look, the Democratic Party is not in great shape politically in this country either, but it's not as poisonous as Trump. And and I think it's really important when they're talking to voters this year, do not get down in the weeds on the things you want to talk about. You've got to talk to voters about the things that they want to talk about because they want to talk about how upset they are. They want to talk about how bad things are for them and their families. They want to hear that you get that they're afraid they can't afford their home. that their kids are afraid, that they're not going to be able to go to college, all those things. Those things actually matter a lot. And I hope the Democrats will pay attention to that as we go into 26. And one other aspect of it, the thing that I've always found to be kind of a killer app in politics is corruption. And a message that Donald Trump sent from the very beginning, I'm going to drain the swamp. I don't think most voters thought draining the swamp means that Donald Trump is going to collect $10 billion from the Treasury Department because he wants to for himself. I don't think most voters woke up and said, "Hey, you know what? I'm really excited for the president's sons to monetize his crypto scams for the country." All those things that he's doing um, have been extraordinarily bad for the GOP and for him in terms of his of public perception. And so it's important that Democrats come into this election cycle, being able to talk about cleaning up Washington, stuff like stock trading in Congress. It has to go. They have to stop it. And if they make that a Republican problem, they're better off than if voters make it their problem. Which right now voters are very mad at both parties on the stock trading stuff. But they've got a chance to play the corruption angle in a very smart, and I think I mean it has the advantage of being politically smart and the right thing to do.
So is the corruption that you would play up the personal enrichment angle, or that the system is sort of broken because it's corrupt? You know what I mean? Like on the one hand, you could
Yeah.
be a voter and be like, I'm upset because the mayor is getting rich off of city contracts. Or you can be upset that the city contract system is corrupt and therefore I can't get my trash picked up.
Mark, at this point, Trump's personal corruption, the golden ballroom, the pay for play pardons, the Trump boys crypto scam of the week, all those things, selling properties or doing property deals overseas that somehow magically, happen. All of it has has an emotional political weight with voters that we should not underestimate. We should calculate that and and that's symptomatic of a broader problem, of course, but it's also so on brand for Trump that that it makes really good sense to hit him on it. Yeah, and these Republicans will defend him to the dying day. They're stuck.
That is the issue set going into the 2026 election. Then we have what I'm worried about, and which where we sort of started, and I want to come back to here. So in the last month, Donald Trump told the New York Times that he wished he had seized the ballot boxes in
Uh-huh.
2020. That was on the
Yep.
record, New York Times. He
Yep.
told Reuters that he wished that there wouldn't be midterm elections at all. Now,
Correct.
Carolyn Levitt then tried to walk that back and say it was a joke. I don't know what about that sounds like a joke. Donald Trump's
He's a
not really a
man with a
jokester.
singular lack of humor. Donald Trump is the least funny president of our lifetimes. There's no humor about the guy. It was not a
Yeah,
joke. He meant it.
right. And then you have him saying at Davos, he actually says breaking this is going to be breaking news, but we're going to be essentially prosecuting uh more of my political opponents. So when you take those things together, right? Like we shouldn't have elections. I should seize ballot boxes. I should prosecute my political opponents. Like I look at this and I take him both literally and seriously, as
Right.
opposed
It's like,
to,
what part of the fascism are you folks not getting out there?
correct, right? I mean, what's your take on what we should expect?
We should expect absolute lawlessness. We should expect him to drive and drive because Trump is a gambler, Mark. He's a guy who will push his luck all the time. He will keep putting it down on red and hoping it works. Um, that desire of him to gamble and to be somehow maybe politically rewarded by by breaking the American electoral system. Why would he not in his head? Who's gonna indict him? Who's gonna indict him at the DOJ? Nobody. Who's gonna impeach him in Congress? Nobody.
But the part that you are assuming, which by the way, I do assume, but I want to just challenge it
Sure,
and
sure.
have you
Of course.
address, is we're not talking about his own election. So we have to assume that there are Republican candidates and Republican leadership in the House and Senate who would be like, "Great, yes, we are for that."
Sure.
And
There would be some right now who I think have had a very tough year because he's gotten crazier, and voters give Trump a pass for a whole panoply of mysterious and not so mysterious reasons about his behavior and his attitudes and his actions. They do not give the same pass to every Republican candidate.
hmm,
So a lot of these Republicans, if you offered them the ability to cheat by suspending the entire election, they'd go, "Yeah, that's a great idea. It's obvious these elections are obviously so corrupt. We have to immediately take steps to make sure that democracy is protected, and they will protect themselves very effectively if they cancel the 2026 elections." Again, I think it's harder than it looks, but we should never underestimate the degree of absolutely savage discipline for the retention of power that defines this era of Republican elected officials.
yeah, no, absolutely. Look, it is harder for them to pull off. First of all, we're going to have elections because states run elections, not the federal government.
Right.
I've told folks
For
that
now.
when I was in law school in the early '90s, before the crowd became a we're a republic, not a democracy. Like
Uh-huh.
the cleverness of the early '90s was we don't have federal elections, we have state
Right.
elections.
Correct.
So that right, but
Oh,
there's
and for all that the Republicans in the 1990s were obsessive about the 10th Amendment,
yes, correct. That's the point I was
um,
getting to. Yep.
at a level of I think Ted Cruz might have had had a Roman numeral 10 tattooed on his back, um, because he used to bring it up so frequently on the Bush campaign. I think that these guys now, it's just important to understand they do not have a constituency in their states. They serve Donald Trump, and to them, Trump is the ultimate political power and the ultimate arbiter of the morality of their decisions. So if Trump says, "I don't want to do elections," they will come out and say, "Yeah, okay. Yes, sir."
I think it's going to be hard for them to pull off in 2026. I think they're going to try. I think it's going to be messy,
Yep.
but I think
They're
it's going to be
gamblers.
hard.
Yeah,
But they're
they're
gamblers.
gamblers.
Well, we get to 2028, you know, and you say that Donald Trump is going to want to stay in office. That can mean one of three things. Number one, he's just going to blow through the Constitution and
Yep.
like figure like
I'm not
the Republic.
leaving.
Right. The second is he just puts in place a nominal president, but he is really in charge. And remember, that's what Putin did
That's
when he
with
was
Medvedev. Yeah, of course.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Precisely. And then the third is that there is actually a free and fair election, or not a free, there's actually a contest within the Republican Party. But Donald Trump just figures whoever he endorses becomes the next president, and they will, in the long run, do whatever he needs to do.
Correct. Correct. I think that is absolutely the likely scenario here
Which of those
that
three?
um that 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 he's going to try to demand a third term. If it doesn't work, he'll demand to select the Republican candidate. Once he selects that candidate, um, he'll do exactly what Putin did with Medvedev. He will have a puppet government. He's president in name, in all but name. He becomes this sort of figure we've never had in American politics before, sort of a gray eminence that controls everything behind the scenes. And we haven't had a scenario like that in our lifetimes or ever in American history, really. Um, and I can speak from experience, as much as Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush were political allies for that period, when we came in the Bush administration, almost all the Reagan people got fired.
Hmm, really?
And I mean, they weren't. It wasn't like ugly. It was just like, hey, you got to go. You got to make room for our people. It wasn't like a fuck you firing. It was like a got to move on firing. And I don't think Trump will accept anything other than, you know, uh, complete obedience from whoever he puts into the job, whatever patsy takes the gig. Um, and that person is going to have to do, up to and including staffing and policy and everything else.
Isn't there though a fundamental problem that with this strategy? Like, let's just say, for example, is JD Vance. Is there a less likable human being? Like, I mean,
Oh
with
God,
JD,
no. I mean, JD Vance is like, if there's an antithesis to charisma, it's JD
right?
Vance. I mean,
So,
he's
like,
a
how
guy.
does it like who how does he get this pulled off if he's left with you know I mean who does he put forward?
I don't know the answer to that yet. It will probably be Vance um, because of the presence of Vance around him every day to kiss his ass for right now. That daily, sir, you are so tall and handsome stuff um, is a powerful advantage Vance has. The other advantage Vance has right now is he's got the Peter Thiel tech bro infrastructure behind him, and that is not an inconsiderable factor in the Republican Party as it exists today.
The last group to cover is the Democrats for 2028, and I'm not going to ask you to predict who's going to be the nominee because that's a
I
fool's
can't
errand.
I because I don't know.
Yeah, but if you were talking to a someone who said to you, "Look, I am thinking of running for president. I don't know, but I'm thinking of it." What Rick Wilson should I be doing now? Like what are the things should I be opposing Trump on things? Should I be keeping my powder dry? Should I be doing a lot of media? Should I be doing no media? Like what should people be doing now?
You should be doing all the media you possibly can every minute of every day.
Wow.
You should be confronting Trump on social media, on earned media. You should be presenting yourself as a fierce reformer who is going to turn the damage Trump has done to the country around. It is it is vital for the Democrats, no matter who it is, that their candidate is a Obama level communicator. It has to be somebody who can absolutely go out and make that message sing to voters. Because if they don't, and we end up with sort of a moderately decent communicator, um, I think we're in big trouble.
So I have noticed this, when I started out in politics, when you were doing a lot of consulting, to be an Obama level communicator, you had to be able to do big events, outdoor big events. You had to be able to do small rooms, and you basically had to be able to do TV studios. And now you have, podcasts, you have videos, you have, podcasts that are not even focused on politics, but are focused on sort of lifestyle that how much how do you weigh the continued influence of kind of the go into the studio. I don't want to get you blackballed at Beat the Press or or wherever, But like how important is it to like go into the studio and sit across from Kristen Welker or George Stephanopoulos?
Yeah, look, it still has a role, but it's less than it's ever been. That world is fading away in terms of being determinative with voters. They are less interested in that world than they've ever been. The numbers just aren't there anymore, and a lot of those shows have both sides themselves into irrelevance, and that is a really poisonous kind of situation for media because if you're trying to pretend both sides are the same in a world where one side wants to burn American democracy to the ground and one side wants to pass policy proposals, you're not dealing with the actual comparable political parties. You're dealing with a movement that is fundamentally authoritarian versus a movement that is fundamentally, you know, technocratic. So those shows, look, I've been on a million of them and they're all fine and good, but they're not as central. I mean, if you go on, let's put it this way. If you're a Democratic candidate, you want to get real traction, you go on Pivot with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. You go on, I've Had It. You go on, any number of podcasts and you introduce yourself to people in a way that has this um the phrase is parasocial connection where people watch you on that and they feel like, okay, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that guy for president. Yeah, I get where he's coming from or she's coming from. all those things are really modern in their moment, but that's why I say you've gotta be great on as a communicator across all of the different, um, valences that matter. It used to be in 2020 at the Lincoln Project, we started a podcast, and people were like, "The hell do you need what does a super PAC need a podcast for?" And nobody asked that question anymore because they saw the elections of 2024 where podcasting was a determinative factor um, in the race because it's where people now seek out news. It's where they find news to be credible. When we formed our podcast, part of it was because there was a poll that we had done among likely voters in our target pool that said 65% of them said that they were getting their political information from podcasts, and I was like, well, that solves that problem.
Isn't there, though, a problem, though, of asymmetry here, which is you look on the right and you have Megyn Kelly, you have
Of course.
Ben
Oh yeah.
Shapiro, they have,
Oh,
Steve Bannon, and
100%.
there's just more throw weight there.
They have a very meaningful amount of superiority in podcasting, in streaming, in a variety of areas, and that's not going to change in the immediate future. That is going to be a problem for non-MAGA candidates for a while now. That is going to be an issue that we don't get away from in the short term, and I'm deeply concerned about it. I talk to these billionaire donors all the time and millionaire donors. They're like, what should we be doing to save democracy? I'm like, yes, you can invest in the politics, but you also need at some point to think about, is there a media landscape in this country anymore that is that is fair, that is
Mm.
balanced? Is the mainstream media really still a thing? And the answer is it's not. The mainstream media that was feared and loathed by the Republicans for so many generations is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And and because it doesn't exist anymore, and because we don't understand as a country how to rebuild media um, persistently over time in a way that that has a pro democracy slant to it, we end up in these very ugly moments that leave people feeling hopeless. That's why independent media on Substack and podcasting has blown up in the last 2.5 years. You have to earn trust now. You have
Mm.
to earn it because you lost it for a reason. You lost it because in 2016 you treated Trump like a sideshow,
That's right.
and and a lot of those people that did that. I'll tell you a great story. I was talking to a Marco Rubio person during the 2016 campaign. He called me in absolute tears. They had this big speech set up, big foreign policy speech set up, ready to go. And CNN, MSNBC, and Fox all covered Trump's plane circling an airport for an hour.
I
Do you remember
remember
that
the
day?
plane circling the airport.
Remember that
Yeah,
day?
I
And
do
and he
actually.
was just mortified. He's like, how do we beat this guy if the news treats him driving his plane around in circles as the biggest story of the day?" And I got to be honest, at the moment that he asked me that, back in 2016, I was like, maybe there's a solution. We could do this and that, but really, that solution wasn't real. It wasn't real. It had been a change. So, but the media let that happen. They gave Trump billions of dollars of earned media. They still do. Um, and they just don't meet the moment all the time. And again, that's tough love. That's not because I hate the media. I don't hate the media. I'm part of it practically. And but they've got to learn that this is an existential crisis and they've got a part to play. And until they do, that's why independent media like this is blowing up everywhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I started this podcast. You know, I was like I'm a lawyer. I have a busy law practice. I never thought I'd start Democracy Docket, which now has
Yeah.
22 employees and reaches hundreds of thousands of people by newsletter every day. And that's, yeah, and the website on top of that. I never thought we'd have that. And I definitely never thought I would do like podcast or video podcast. Like it's not my thing, but like honestly, we now have, 630 some odd thousand subscribers on YouTube. And it's like this is how people are consuming. If I'm trying to get people to understand the threat to free and fair elections, if I'm trying to get them to understand what's going on in court, as much as I would like to say that my legal work, that I let it speak for itself. The truth is, it doesn't speak for itself, and the legacy media doesn't cover it. And so, this is the way that you actually communicate with people. And I hope more politicians understand that.
Yeah, I hope so too, Mark. And I think they're beginning to understand it. But we do live in a world where the media landscape and the media atmosphere is altered so dramatically because of socials. There are things that we are not prepared as a society to deal with yet of the algorithmic drivers of of social media and how those are manipulated by sophisticated people. And unfortunately, right now, between Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, they're all owned by Trump allies who are
I know.
perfectly happy to put their thumb on the scale of everything.